The Afghan president says he fled the country to avoid what he called a flood of bloodshed as the Taliban entered the presidential palace in the capital, Kabul. Ashraf Ghani said he believes countless patriots would have been martyred and the city of Kabul destroyed if he had stayed. The president said the Taliban have won and they are now responsible for the honor, property, and self-preservation of their countrymen. Ghani is said to have fled to a neighboring country, but a foreign ministry official has said his destination is unknown. A spokesman for the Taliban says the militants assure everyone that they will provide safety for citizens and diplomatic missions. He also says the group does not think foreign forces will repeat what he called their failed experience in Afghanistan. Reactions are pouring in after the Taliban militants took control of the capital, Kabul. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged the Taliban and all other parties to exercise utmost restraint in order to protect lives. European Council President Charles Michel wrote on Twitter that the security of European Union staff and citizens was the bloc's immediate priority. Meanwhile, Russia says it is working with other countries to hold an emergency UN Security Council meeting on Afghanistan. Moscow says it does not yet recognize the Taliban as Afghanistan's new lawful authority. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson said countries should not recognize the Taliban as Afghan government. Well, let's bring in Mr. Max Parry. He's an independent geopolitical analyst who joins us via Skype out of New York for an exclusive reaction to these two stories that I just read. Max, it's good to have you with us on the show. How do you read the situation now?
Well, I believe that Russia is in a very difficult position here because they are, on the one hand, they're going to have to negotiate with an organization that is officially banned in the country and is rightly deemed a terrorist organization. There have been a lot of I won't mention any names, but a lot of analysts who I think seem rather eager to rehabilitate or whitewash the Taliban's legacy because they've rebranded themselves in recent years. But make no mistake, this is still a terrorist organization, despite whatever anyone wants to say about the fact that they're less homogenous than they used to be, or that they may be diplomatic and more practical in how they conduct themselves in terms of their politics. But just a month ago, they committed a terrorist attack where something like 70 Hazara children were killed at a school. So this is a terrorist organization, and if they want to have that designation removed by a country like Russia, they're going to have to make significant concessions, especially since for Russia this is both a security risk. I mean, there's amid this political crisis and this power vacuum, I imagine there's going to be a significant amount of refugees, Tajiks pouring into Central Asia, and not just Russia, but other countries. I mean, there's going to be a lot of potentially Hazaras, the Shia minority, migrating into Iran. There's reports that Pakistan isn't taking in as many refugees. They already have a ton. Russia is in a difficult position here, but they really need to step in, because clearly, the way that the U.S. has conducted this withdrawal has not only been completely haphazard and chaotic, but just completely irresponsible. I mean, as soon as the Taliban and the U.S. signed this peace deal in Doha, Biden made it clear that he wasn't going to approve airstrikes against the Taliban, and that the Afghan National Army was going to have to defend Kabul by itself. I myself and many other analysts were predicting that the Ghani government wouldn't last 2 months. I don't think anybody could have predicted that it wouldn't last 2 weeks. I mean, this is just unprecedented what's taken place. So there could be a very serious humanitarian crisis, and Russia has, and many other regional players have good reason and need to step in here, not just for their own interest, but also for the sake of the Afghan people, especially given the Taliban's nature and its history of persecuting minorities and presiding over a very brutal and repressive regime. And like I said, even though they've given themselves a facelift in recent years, we don't know what could take place, especially amid a very chaotic and lawless environment where there could be retribution killings, and
Sure.
there needs
Max,
to be.
let me change the question for you. Point taken. But you just mentioned about the role that larger countries like Russia can obviously play in the future dealings of the Taliban with the world countries. But don't you think, it seems to me like a fact that as they have had their own secret dealings with the leaders of the different regions in Afghanistan before they entered those cities, it's impossible to me that they have not had those dealings with some international parties before even they started this large move to capture the whole of Afghanistan, or perhaps, on the way to capturing the whole country, for them not to have had any sort of dealings with the foreign governments. First off, what do you think about this? And then, of course, the role that Ashraf Ghani himself played in this. You mentioned the issue of 2 weeks. I'd like to say that it's maybe even less than that. 2 weeks ago, I remember he said that I am not like such and such person to leave the country when attacked. And that was exactly 2 weeks ago. And now in 2 weeks, nobody knows where he is. On these two questions, please.
Well, even Biden was saying 2 months ago in July that there wasn't going to be any Saigon-like moment where American personnel were having to be evacuated on a helicopter, and that, as we all know, that's exactly what took place today. So no, there's no question that it's unprecedented what's taken place, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not even sure that the nature of this withdrawal is even comparable to Vietnam, because at least in the latter case, the government in Saigon lasted a full 2 years, and same thing when the Soviets pulled out in 1989. It lasted 3 years until the Taliban emerged. I mean, this is just a very, very rapid power vacuum that's occurred. But I'm not sure that the Russians really, and as well as the Chinese, it seems to me like you were alluding that the Taliban had some sort of outside help, and I do think that this is being instigated to a certain extent by the Pakistanis, but I'm not even sure that it would be opportune for them to have an outright Taliban rule, because they have their own Taliban affiliate domestically, and a complete Taliban takeover would mean possibly emboldening the TTP within Pakistan,
right,
or Pashtun nationalism, Pashtun insurgency. So this is a security risk for all parties involved, even the ones like that are Pakistan doesn't officially support the Taliban, but obviously elements within the military and government do. So, but I think that all parties involved here, region, it's in their interest to have a negotiated peace settlement, a power sharing agreement where there isn't rife conditions for a civil war.
Yeah.
So
Max,
whether it's Russia or anybody else needs to step in and mediate the situation.
Yeah, and one final question before I let you go, Max. I'm pretty sure actually the extent of those negotiations goes far beyond Pakistan, but about the people in Afghanistan, it's just, God knows, it's hard to imagine how they feel about the role of the West, especially the U.S., played in this. It's very ironic that basically it's the beginning and the ending are the same episode in 20 years. The Taliban at the beginning, the Taliban at the end in 2 decades, after going down, up and down so much for the people of this country. Like I said, only we can just imagine how those people may feel about the role that these powers actually played in the fate of their countries, of their country. Well, what do you think about this? And also, the fact that it's very interesting. The U.S. left a lot of its army equipment, let me put it that way, a lot of its arms, vehicles, you name it, that the Taliban did not have 20 years ago. Now we face, like you said, a facelift version of the Taliban that is left with, I'd like to think, a lot of army equipment, war equipment. Don't you think that's going to tell you something, Max, right?
Well, it certainly speaks to the extent to which U.S. hegemony is in decline. And for me, it's, this is a real caveat for any country out there aligned with Washington to understand that, at any point on the spot, the U.S. is willing to throw its allies to the wolves, and that, Washington has no real friendships or commitments, and it's willing to, just abruptly abandon any of them for the sake of its own interests. So, if any country wants to maintain their collective security with NATO, they're really doing so at their own risk. The Ghani government was part of a Western-friendly narco regime that ruled the country for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And this debacle, in the end, it was completely betrayed and abandoned by the U.S. as soon as it was opportune to do so. So this is a real lesson for America's mini puppet governments.
Max, with this equipment that the Taliban have inherited from the U.S., that's what I'm trying to say, and from basically indirectly from the U.S., and now that they have actually inherited them from the Afghan security forces that they were in control of until just a couple of days ago. What do you think they're going to do with that? They're going to, I don't know, guard Afghanistan, or perhaps, I'm saying that there could be, like some people say, some scenario here.
Yeah, I think that I don't know if anyone can predict what shape exactly the Taliban regime is going to take place, as far as how much it will compare to the emirate that they established in the late 90s. They claim to have abandoned, a lot of the policies as far as, oppression of women and how strict their interpretation of Sharia law is.
Okay.
But who knows? I mean, now that they've gotten a hold of all this sophisticated weaponry, there's a real danger about persecution of the minorities that they have a history of committing atrocities against. So this is why, again, international players need to step in and mediate a real lasting peace settlement. Because we could have a real bloodbath here, already more than the 40-year bloodbath that's been going on since the U.S. decided to arm the Mujahideen in the Afghan-Soviet War.
All right. Many, many thanks. That's Max Parry. He's an independent geopolitical analyst out of New York.